Hello and welcome to a very special roundtable discussion about anxiety and horror. With me, I am your host Boris, and with me I have Uncle Pete
Hey, everybody.
and Carlin.
How's it going?
I was so excited for this. I forgot to introduce myself. If you're watching this on YouTube, you could be watching it on Uncle Pete's or Carlin's channels. Welcome. I run a podcast called Guest of Horror, which both of these guys have been on, and you can find the audio version of this discussion on my feed called Guest of Horror. So, you guys have been on my podcast, and you were very open about your struggles with anxiety and the fact that you are both good friends. And I just thought this would be a really good discussion to have because I am also I deal daily with anxiety, and this is something like we all three of us have immediately bonded over.
Yes.
So, how do you guys feel going into this?
I'm looking forward to it. Like I was, just when we were talking earlier, I was thrilled when, Carlin watched our podcast together, Boris and I, and then like he contacted you, and then I found out all three of you, all three of us wanted to do this. I was like, that's awesome because when somebody doesn't deal with anxiety, it's hard for them to understand. I feel, so having like-minded people who can, I guess, empathize when I say I'm feeling XYZ, they understand it instead of just saying just don't think about it like most people who don't have anxiety just say. So be able to have an open discussion with people who totally understand what I feel and what I'm saying, it's it's relief. It's like a stress relief, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's also this thing of like we are from different parts of the world. I'm in Stockholm, Sweden, so if you're hearing an accent pop out every now and again, that's why. But even though we are different people in different parts of the world, in different parts of our lives, we have these things that connect us, and I thought it's worthy of at least a discussion. We might do this again at some point if we have more to talk about.
Sure. And I personally find that actually like doing something like this, just talking about anxiety, especially with people who also share in those feelings, um, it can help. It can be a bit of a therapeutic thing just to kind of talk some things through.
For sure. So I guess a good baseline to start here would be to share as much as we are comfortable with about our anxiety. You don't have to talk for like 5-10 minutes or whatever, but just like a baseline thing. I want this to be like obviously a safe space, but but it's also a public space, right? So just share as much as you're comfortable with, and Carlin, we can start with you.
Sure. So a lot of my anxieties kind of spawned from not knowing what's next, kind of like the unknown. One of the big things I noticed earlier on in my life was feeling anxiety around the idea of having to travel somewhere I haven't been before and having that kind of unknown creep in from that. And then becoming very aware that even though I would go to those places or travel there and do just fine, nothing out of the ordinary happened, I still every single time would just get these anxious feelings. So it's a lot about that. Also, there was a point in my life where I started to try and plan things out as much as I could and kind of project ahead to kind of get ahead of things. Actually, that was in grad school for me because of, managing workload while I was working a 40-hour week job. And that just started ingraining in me a new thing to have anxiety about, which is planning things out and just thinking ahead. And then when I just start thinking ahead about all the things that need to get done, it's like they become this giant pile of thoughts and they become so overwhelming, even though it's stuff that may be a day away, a week away, a month away, whatever. So those are my main anxiety triggers, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Pete?
Yeah, and the piggyback of what Carlin said, he said it's like that unknown. For me, it's feeling unsafe. You know, and logically speaking, yeah, I know I'm perfectly safe. I can handle myself. I can take care of I mean, I was in the Navy for 22 years, so I can handle unsafe situations. I was trained to. I got no problem with that. But it just, I guess it's that unfamiliar feeling and just not feeling safe where I know I'm safe and secure. So it just it puts me on edge, and then like I get real irritable. It just, like I said, yeah, I'm repeating myself. Just it gets to the point where I feel unsafe. So, but like Carlin said, also planning it out. Like I plan, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. So when my routine gets broken, it's also really makes me feel uncomfortable. Like every morning I get up, I make a cup of coffee, I have a bagel, I do this. I'm gonna go to the grocery store at this time. I plan everything out because I know exactly what's going to happen. And if the monkey wrench gets thrown in that, it really makes me feel off. But yeah, it's same thing planning, because that's what I did in the military. You would plan ahead. You would plan and you train so you're prepared. So, and I think my anxiety got a little worse after I retired from the Navy because I didn't have that structure, more or less.
Yeah.
Now I'm just retired at home every day. In the military, I traveled. I traveled all the one the world. I was in dangerous situations being in the military, and I kind of held it fine. But now, since I don't have that structure, sometimes I can feel my anxiety getting a little bit worse sometimes. But also, one thing I realized, when I say it out loud, sometimes it kind of takes the sting off of it. Like if I
Mhm.
tell my wife I'm feeling anxious because XYZ, it takes a little bit sting off it because I'm bringing it out of my head, and in reality, I'm like, oh, okay, so yeah, you don't have to worry about that. If that makes sense.
Yes, that's very interesting. The thing that I wanted to add to that, it's very very interesting to hear that you say that once you got out of the military and that sort of sense of structure was lost, that your anxiety became worse. Because now I'm a little younger here, so when I first started working, this was like 6, 7 years ago, probably. That's where my anxiety kicked in, because all of a sudden I was on call. All of a sudden I had to perform at certain times. I was no longer in college where I could if I didn't if I didn't do my regular work that I had planned out for the day in college, well, as long as the paper is due in whatever weeks or whatever, I could just postpone that, or I could just say, hey, I'm having a mental health day. For me, it got a lot worse when I got into actually working and having to be on call and like following a schedule and stuff like that. Like that was really, really tough for me. And that was the point where I realized that I had to like start medication and therapy and all that. So I just thought that was interesting.
Well, and it is interesting because it's like, for me, I understand a bit of that, because it seems like once you got out of college, it was kind of like you're smacked with this real life situation where the pressures of real life then just start kind of pressing down on you. And I feel like that's also something that's worked on me ever since I got out of like kind of like the protective cover of something like college, because when you're a kid, you don't have to deal with the pressures of life. Then you're in school, you don't really have to deal with the pressures of life other than what's going on in school, so it's like you have one focus. And then college, kind of the same. And then once you're out of that, it's just like the world's just like throwing so many things at you. It's like, make sure you perform well at your job. Are you going to get more education? Because you're going to have to do that at the same time. Don't forget to go get your groceries. Better clean your house. Are you going to have a house? You need to pay that mortgage. Like
Yeah.
thing after thing after thing. And it just gets to be a lot. And that's why I think that a lot of people who probably don't talk about it also have anxiety, and a lot of it, I'm sure, stems from how high stress societies become.
Yes. One thing that I was thinking about was like, well, actually, I've had anxiety for pretty much as long as I can remember. Like some of my earliest childhood memories are like panic attacks, which I didn't know
Oh, wow.
at the time that they were panic
Yeah.
attacks. But as long as as you said, Carlin, you have that protective bubble, you can sort of adjust yourself, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like no, you are working, you are managing finances, and you have to make your adult life work. Um,
See, it's funny how you said protected because I was almost on the other side of the coin when I retired because when I was active duty, when I put that uniform on, I felt like it was. I was just Carlin knows I'm a big superhero fan. When I would put my uniform on, I felt like it was like an Iron Man outfit or Spider Man putting on its outfit. I felt protected having that uniform on. I felt safe having that uniform on for whatever reason. So again, when I retired, that was I don't want to say taken away, but I had to medically retire after 22 years. So that's why I think my anxiety got a little worse because I felt safer in uniform. I felt safe on the ship, going to foreign ports. I felt safe in that environment. But I think a lot of it is the unknown that came after I retired because I don't have to go to work every day now. I'm retired. I'd sit at home. I was like, okay, where's all that structure? Where's all
yeah.
that structure I was so ingrained in for, the first 40 years of my life, from growing up and then, 18 years old, boom, I left for the military and then okay, now I'm retired now, so it's just yeah, I could totally understand. You know, it's that whole thing with it sounds like we all have different aspects of the same thing, just different, feeling safe, feeling protected, stuff like that.
Yes.
Kind of sounds to me like what you were describing about, putting on the uniform and kind of like feeling different. There was just like a different mental mode that you would get into because you had something to focus on,
Yep.
something to occupy your mind. And I totally feel that. And this is how I'm going to tie it into film in general, horror film in this instance, but film in general. Like, that's an escape. That's a focus. It's something you can immerse yourself into that's not your life, that doesn't have the pressures of your life, that doesn't have the actual things that trigger your anxiety within it. You're experiencing a different world that's kind of like fantasy. It's taking you somewhere else and occupying your mind for that time. And for me personally, like, I've always had this feeling where after I'm done watching a film, I feel more relaxed. I feel
Yep.
more calm. I feel like, I don't know, kind of like I just like got a full on massage and I'm just like good.
And it's funny what you say about escape because it's like the horrors in real life are more scary than any horror movie out there. Like
Yes.
we all know in real life there are no dream demons. There are no unstoppable killers that if you shoot them a bunch of times they're going to still come out after you. There's no, real life. There's no monsters and, flying creatures and stuff. Because real life is more scary than that. Just because people are more scary than that. So it's that escapism like, oh, I'm safe in this because I know none of this can really ever happen to me. But that's why when you got horror movies where it it's grounded in reality, those I find real terrifying, and my
Yeah.
anxiety can go up while I'm watching them because, when we all watch movies, you put yourself in the position when somebody dies. Okay, how would it feel to get killed that way? And that's how you get to the excitement of it. So when a movie's grounded in reality, like with bullying or something like that, I find it much more terrifying. Like I've told Carlin, I can't watch movies that deal with SA. It just, sexual assault. It makes me very, very uncomfortable. That I just like, I'll have to skip it or whatnot because that's grounded in reality and something that can actually happen to people. So movies with that, I won't not watch the movie, but I'll just like okay, skip past it.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite of that,
Mhm.
which is I really look for films that will challenge me. Like that will make me uncomfortable, that will,
Mhm.
you know, like I don't know what it is. It's probably the same like part of my brain that really loves true crime,
Mhm.
right? Of like,
Yeah.
this is awful, but I am in a safe environment watching the awfulness. um, but yeah, I think a thing that I wanted to ask you guys was like, what type of horror do you usually gravitate towards?
I'm gonna go with the typical. I love the typical slasher where you get the unexpected hero. whether it's that kid that got bullied or picked on, or the final girl that was the wallflower. And when you see their transformation throughout the film, to being the hero at the end, it's like kind of living vicariously through them. you know Horror movies grinded like that, like the first Halloween. This is one of my favorite movies of all time, because you see Laurie Strode go from, you know, little, good girl, doesn't want to do anything wrong. She's carrying her books on the way home from school, and she becomes his heroine at the end because of what she was challenged with. And then you see her progress throughout some of the other films eventually. That's what I love. When you get that unexpected hero in the beginning, like, oh, that's not the hero, and then you see their character transformation to being the hero at the end. Like even Ripley in Aliens, or Alien, is another great example. Stuff like that, I definitely gear towards.
Me personally, I usually gravitate more towards films that do seem a lot less real. Ones that are more fantastical, like, when I was on the podcast, I talked about Phantasm. That stuff's like really out there. But I feel like for me, that's mainly from like a creativity standpoint. I'm just very stimulated by things that are new to me. Something I may not have considered before, some aspect of a story that is brand new, and I'm just like, wow, this person just did this. That's so unique. Also, on the other side, movies that are just terrible, like so bad they're good, because there's a laugh factor there. I can watch it and be like, oh my gosh, this is just so fun and funny, and I can laugh to myself at how bad they are. So yeah, it's mainly those types. I find myself not going towards some other things, like not a big fan of found footage. A lot of the times that's just because of the style of how it's done. Like, I like nice smooth camera work for the most part, and obviously found footage, like the whole point is it's like someone's kind of like running with the camera. It's very rough. Also, it usually gets drawn out a lot longer because that's kind of the style. It's like real life happening right now type stuff. Also, like, not big into like hauntings, just because I'm not a ghost person. I don't really believe in the concept of ghosts. So it doesn't really do a whole lot for me. But I will say the Haunting of Connecticut, it's not a great movie, but it is pretty terrifying. I will say that. And what's the other? There's one other one. Oh, like possession films. But for me, that just becomes the fact that they all feel the same, and zombie films in the same vein. A lot of those end up feeling the same, but every now and then there's some
Yeah.
interesting ones.
And one thing I find with
Yep.
I'll enjoy any horror movie if you lose that concept of like reality. Like if I can
Yeah,
live in this person's world, if the movie can draw me into that, I enjoy it so much more. Like if I could put myself as a fly on the wall, like, no, I'm inside the warehouse right now. Like I've told both of you guys, my favorite movie of all time is Return of the Living Dead. So
yeah,
when I watch that movie, I'm right there with the punks partying, or I'm with Freddy in the medical supply warehouse. If a movie can pull me in like that, and I can't say anything specifically that happens, it's just maybe the directing, or just the cinematography. If a movie can pull me in and make me like a third person in there, I'll definitely watch it.
Y-
And I think one person who does that perfectly is John Carpenter. His films pull you in. Like Christine, you're sitting in the car when
yeah.
Arnie's driving. You're sitting in the car with Arnie, and I think John Carpenter does a really good job at pulling you in to his universe.
Yeah, I think I have a similar thing with Italian horror. Because a lot of those, like, they, and sometimes some of those movies, rare, like, they don't feel like movies. They just feel like you're watching weird
Yeah,
art pieces.
Yeah.
yeah.
And it really, like, it, that's one of those things where, like, I totally understand someone being like, giallos, like, those are nonsensicals, I don't like them. Like, yes, fair criticism, but like
Yeah.
for me, like, I'm just drawn into that world and like put in a trance for like 2 hours.
Carl and I did a long a marathon last year for his birthday, and we watched like 8 giallo films in one day. And I
Yep.
did not get up. Carl and I did not get up from our seats for
Yep.
like 6 movies because I was just so sucked into this, and they were all fantastic movies. I was like, okay, that's my new favorite. Okay, that's my new favorite. And I
Yeah.
fell in love with the characters, like the strange vice of Mrs. Worth.
Yes.
It just
Amazing.
I fell in love with her. It's like, oh my god, it's like, I need to. It's one of those, when you find a movie that you finish watching it, you like, I need to watch that again right away. You know, it
Yeah.
just, and going back to anxiety, when you have that escape, when you can smile and you finish watching a movie, and like Carlin said, you feel like you just had a massage or you just got out of a hot tub. You feel so incredible because of
Yeah.
the adrenaline, the release, everything in it. And I think Giallo does an excellent job with that because the twists, the turns at the end, it's done so well. So yeah, when a movie hits, it's awesome.
Yeah, so I think there's is interesting with horror. There are like these two opposites, right? Of like the old slashers, like the Freddy and Jason movies, or like the giallos, of like these really fun, like you get put in a trance and just escapism, right?
Mhm.
And then there's this other part of horror of like talking about just not social anxieties, but like anxieties that we have as human beings on this earth. Right, like Candyman, Get Out. There's so many
Yeah.
examples of this. One that hit really hard for me was Hereditary, just the way it like talked about family, about not getting along with family, and that was something that really, at that point in my life, hit really hard for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in. But first of all, Hereditary is insanely intense. But another Ari Aster film, I would say that how Hereditary kind of hit for you, Midsommar hit for me because it's about going through a bad relationship and coming out on the other end, and the way that they make that metaphor, it feels similar, but the story's different, and you don't really realize until the end of the film, like, man, that's what it is. And if you have been through a bad relationship, like I actually have, a long time ago, thankfully, um you just kind of like ruminate on that, and you're just like, yeah, those are the feelings. Like, he kind of hit the stages of this relationship and the resolution at the end pretty well.
I'm trying to think of other examples of like movies that hit like this, but
Well, you were talking about kind of the anxieties as people that we
yes.
have, and one of the big things that's just been known by a lot of academics, especially about the horror genre, is the idea that whenever the horror films are being made, for the most part, they're reflecting societal ills. They're reflecting the issues that society is dealing with at that time. There's a really great horror documentary called Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue that
Mm.
kind of goes over each decade and what the common threads amongst horror films were at the time, and how that translated to what was happening in the world at that time. And it literally is the best showing of how, horror filmmakers are taking our anxiety and they're putting it on the screen to reflect it back to us, to make us aware of what we're anxious about.
Yeah, like I was thinking about this when Uncle Pete and I did my podcast where we talked about Black Christmas, and like I don't think it's a coincidence that like Black Christmas, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Town That Dreaded Sundown, like all those movies came out in a similar time span of when like serial killers were, just terrorizing America.
Yeah. Well, I mean, consider, the whole post 9/11 situation. That's when it seems like violence in a lot of horror films you know, it didn't become more because there had always been violence, but it seemed more real. Like, they went for more realism. They wanted to look more gritty. They wanted more realistic performances when people were being tortured and or killed. Like, that's a
Well,
prime
yeah,
example.
a lot of people, a lot of people will sort of poo-poo on films like Hostel and Saw and stuff like that, but it's very easy to see the correlation between, uh, Guantanamo. I remember very vividly, like, the invasion of Iraq being broadcasted on television live as it happened.
And especially with stuff like that, it kind of feels like indulging in that type of stuff as far as horror films go. It's like it prepares you to see what you're going to see and experience what you're going to experience, that ends up being on the news, that ends up being nowadays on social media, where you're going to see carnage. You're going to see the carnage even if you want to or not. You're going to, something's going to pop up on the screen, or you're going to scroll past something that you weren't quite prepared for on a visceral level. So it's kind of like horror films, by being more violent, by being more real in its violence and torture and death, is preparing you in a sense to experience that. So maybe it kind of deadens the blow in a way.
And then let's see another uh, aspect of the horror films that I love. It's also like that reluctant hero, like
Mm,
Ash in Evil Dead, or
sure.
even McCready in The Thing. Arguably two of the most, you name top 10 horror movies of all time. The Thing and Evil Dead are most likely going to be in people's top 10. And I gravitate towards those movies with that reluctant hero, kind of like to what I was saying earlier, because it's living vicariously. You know,
Yeah.
you're living vicariously through these people because you admire their bravery, their drive, their determination, and everything. Not that you don't see it in yourself. I think because you do see it in yourself, why, you live through those people. Why, I love people like, I love Ash and McCready and Laurie Strode, because you see aspects of what you have inside in those people lived out on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that I think is powerful about horror is that how many, like, heroes and heroines are just regular people, right? Like, everyone always talks about Die Hard as being this, like, oh, he's just a security guard. He is an amazing human being.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot of horror protagonists are just, regular people put in a very extreme situation, and there's
Yep.
something, there's something really charming about that.
It's kind of interesting because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about it, because for you, Uncle Pete, you're talking about, like, ordinary people, rising to the occasion, basically. And it's interesting because different aspects of your life, what you're interested in, are different modes of that. Like horror, obviously, it's usually people being thrown into a situation where they have to do something, like they have no choice for the most part, so they rise to the occasion. You're big into superheroes and comic books,
Yep.
and that's people who are called upon to rise to the occasion. They have to make a hard choice, and they do it for the greater good. But then also, you were in the Navy, and that's kind of making a choice to put yourself in the position to rise to the occasion and be called upon to do, tough things.
And it's funny because I never look at it at that way, because I never got used to people telling me thank you for your service when I was in
Right.
uniform. It was so humbling because I was like, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. I volunteered, this is what I'm supposed to do. But other people look up to me like, oh my God, you were in the military for 22 years. You retired as a master chief. I was just like, I don't want to say I was just doing my job, but I was just doing what had to be done. But you saying that, I never really make that connection. Like the people I admire in comics and in horror movies, very similar. Like they were called upon, or they were put in a situation where they had to. I never see that in myself. But now, you saying, I was like, yeah, I guess there is a correlation there.
Yeah, I mean, like, your life ethos should be answering the call.
Yeah.
Like, rise to the occasion, answer the call.
Well, that's why my favorite I have a pun on it in my on my channel, Nails in the Coffin. I love with great power there must also come great responsibility. I mean, I have it tattooed on my arm, but it goes down into it like, you have responsibility to be there when, you have to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to get into this article that
Oh,
you
sure.
found,
Sure.
Carlin? It's How Horror Movies Can Help Mental Health According to Science by Kim Wongxing of CNET.com. Yeah, you're the one who linked this to us, Carlin. So do you want to set us
Yeah.
up a little bit?
So I had actually done found an article through National Geographic some years ago. I couldn't find it again, but this article is kind of like an update of that, where they were talking about some some scientific research where they had found that people actually do better with their anxiety from watching horror films, that it actually can be therapeutic. And once I read that, it started to really make sense, because I'm like, when I watch horror movies, I do feel better. Like, I feel more calm. And I used to think that it just had to do with, just entertainment, escapism, but there's more to that. And the article basically talks about how people who have anxieties put themselves into a different anxious situation when they're watching these horror films, and it will kind of elicit part of that response that you get from being anxious, but it's easier to work through that and get the payoff of dealing with it without dealing with it in your own life, because it feels safer, because
Yep.
you're not in any sort of danger, but you're pulled into the story in the film enough that you're experiencing it a slight bit like you're there. So it literally kind of like gives you the calmness after the film from a scientific standpoint that you would get through dealing with an intense situation that makes you anxious in real life. So that was kind of the crux of it.
Yeah, and one part about the article that I want to talk about, because I was like, when you read something and you feel like you wrote it because it's exactly how you feel. There's a phrase, there's a part that goes, but in people with anxiety or trauma, the fight or flight response has a bit of a glitch. Our brains react to normal everyday occurrences as if they were a major threat to our lives. And because there's no real threat, just a general vague sense of doom, we really get any sense of resolution or relief. And I was like, exactly. You're like, no, it's not logical when me saying I feel unsafe going to the grocery store or whatnot. But I always have that catastrophizing in the back of my head. So when you watch horror movies, you get that relief.
Yeah.
You can get that relief on it. And I think Boris and I spoke about this when we did his podcast. It's the same way why I love heavy metal. I listen to death metal and black metal. He's from Sweden, so I know he knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And people like, can you fall? I said I would fall asleep listening to heavy metal. Like, how can you fall? It's relaxing, and it's the same thing with horror because it gives you that release that you don't get. That, I guess, I don't want to say normal people because there's no such thing.
Right.
But that's why I like that phrase about, there's not that release because you live with that anxiety. But, horror movies, it gives that to you. And that sentence really summed it up for me. I'm like, yep, the person who wrote this knows exactly how I feel.
Yeah. And there's another part in the article where it was talking about how they found that people with anxiety and people who like horror films share what they termed morbid curiosity, as wanting to know about dangers, like getting further into it and really digging into things that are terrifying, things that are a danger to people potentially. And when I read that, I'm like, that obviously makes sense, because I'm super curious about this stuff all the time, especially when I'm watching horror films. And then I think, Boris, that also fits into the true crime aspect of what, you liking true crime stuff. I actually do as well. So
Yeah. Um, sorry, looking over the article. um,
Well, as you're
yeah.
looking up, just, to continue on, with horror movies, it's safe to be scared because
mhm.
I think living with anxiety, I don't want to say it's embarrassing, but it has a stigma, especially if people don't understand it. People may perceive you as weak, or
Right.
or scared, or, oh, that fight or flight. Some of the anxiety is always going to flight. That's not true, but I mean, with the horror movies, it's safe to be scared. I know, like I said, I know there's not an unstoppable killer who's going to come at me no matter what I shoot at him. Or I know there's not this big gelatinous blob that's going to dissolve me if it even touches me. So it's okay to be scared in that instant because you know it can't happen. And that's that release that we were talking about. Like it like, oh, you feel, you get done watching a really good horror movie, you like take that deep breath at the end, like, wow, that was awesome, because it gets you all excited and stuff, and then you get relieved, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, that relief is really something. I got anxious just now a little bit because I lost my train of thought, and I'm like, God, I'm gonna seem so stupid now. I'm
Yeah.
quiet for like 30 seconds. The
And
whole
exactly. And then you
yeah.
got that catastrophizing in your head. Like, really, it was like 5 seconds, but in your head, it's like, oh my God, I haven't said anything for 10 minutes. But it's just that it's funny how that catastrophizing takes over. Like, in reality, it's like 5 seconds, but in your head, I haven't said anything for 10 minutes. Oh my God.
Yes.
So I totally get that, dude.
Yeah, and it's this thing, like you guys are bringing up so many good points that like you've said pretty much everything about this article that I've already written down. So I'm like, well, now, okay, well, if I don't say anything, I'm gonna seem stupid, and if I seem stupid, we can't put this on the internet. And that snowball really keeps going,
Yeah,
and that's why I'm just so happy to have you guys here to talk with, because I know that I can say these things and you
totally.
totally understand,
And
right?
that's one thing I think how Carlin and I connected, because I was on YouTube years ago and I was looking at unboxing videos on something, and I came across Carlin's video. He was doing an unboxing in a horror box, and I liked it. So I'm like, hey, this is a pretty cool channel. Let me watch some other stuff. And I saw he was doing movie reviews, so I was like, all right, dude, I think he mentioned, hey, if you have anything you think you would like me to cover. So I subscribed him, like, you have to cover Return of the Living Dead. So like nonstop for like a couple months, I was like, no, dude, you have to watch Return of the Living Dead, because I wanted to share my enjoyment in that movie. And he watched it and reviewed it, and then we just started contacting through YouTube, and then it's snowballed. So now, like, every 2 weeks we do Carlin started this watch party. We've been doing that for like over 2 years now. Every
Yeah.
other Saturday we watch a horror movie just like this, and we're just talking over it, talking about our lives and stuff. And one thing that Carlin brought up was really important. The horror community is not as toxic as you would believe. Yes, there are trolls out there, but the horror community is kind of really more close knit than I could say the comic book community or people into music or whatnot. It's like the horror community is like the most understanding, and I guess we're like more
Yeah.
nice to each other, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. And maybe that comes from a lot of people suffering from anxiety or other mental health issues, as this article that brings up. For me, I the idea to like sort of do a YouTube channel and podcast like that came before talking before I made the decision to talk about horror. But
Mhm.
it was really the main reason why I chose to talk about horror is because the horror community is so like cool, diverse, and really accepting. And
Yeah,
I don't know, Carlin, has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, and actually, I was individually, and I think we all start this way. I was individually into horror initially. Like, I wasn't experiencing horror films with other people or as a horror community. When I first started going to horror conventions, I don't know, like a little bit under 20 years ago, I just became very aware of how much of a community it really is. Like, crowded, people bumping into each other, and people apologizing, and like I like stepped on someone's foot and someone didn't immediately get mad like I feel like they would have in regular everyday life. They were just like, oh, no, 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 all good, man. And then another time when I went to like a vendor's booth and I was looking at some back issues of Rue Morgue magazine that I was interested in, and another person looked and was like, "Ooh, I was thinking about buying that, but since you're holding it, if you want to buy it, go for it, man." Like, I just saw so many people coming together and just being nice. And I'm seeing that also now online, specifically like on Twitter. Yes, like Uncle Pete said, you get some people out there who just want to be jerks. But I've seen a lot more of the good stuff. People just being nice to each other, people reaching out to each other and lifting each other up when someone said, I'm having a hard time right now, or I'm struggling. People doing mental health check-ins with people, even if it's just kind of throwing it out on there and saying, "Hey, horror community, mental health check, where are you today?" And then people will jump in and kind of go back and forth and be like, having a rough day. And then someone will kind of, break off of that and be like, "Hey, see, you're having a rough day. You want to talk about it?" Or, sending you good vibes, or sending photos of their pets, like, hope this makes you feel better today.
Yeah.
Even small things like that. There's been a lot of good. And I think we just need to keep, as a horror community, we just need to keep feeling fine about talking about how we're doing. You don't just have to say good, because that's the normal society mode of people
Yeah.
being like, "How you doing today?" They just want you to say fine so they can just move on. If you say anything other than that, they get stuck. They like notice them hit a speed bump at that point and not know how to respond to you. So we just need to kind of normalize, just let people know how you're doing.
And like you said, I think there's just saying it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
I had some issues the last couple of years, Carlin, and like I was just like, hey Carlin, you got a minute? So I would I messaged him. I'm like, you got a minute? I just wanted to just chat to him. He gives me a call, and it was just let me vent. I wasn't asking for advice or an opinion. I just need to tell somebody how I'm feeling, to somebody who would listen and say, you're going to be okay. Not necessarily say, I understand what you're going through or anything like that, but just someone to actually listen and say, it must be difficult to go through that. And then it's like, you almost feel like a different person afterwards. Like, oh man, I feel so much better, just to get that weight off my chest, because there's a stigma that comes with anxiety. Like I said earlier, someone could perceive you as weak, or not as strong, or not as brave or whatnot. Like, you just can't handle normal stuff. It's got nothing to do with it. And I think it's courageous for someone to say or admit, I have anxiety because of this. Or if someone told me, I get scared to go to the dentist because I feel like the drill is going to drill through the back of my head. It's a legitimate way that person is feeling, whether or not there's logic behind it. That's how that person is feeling. So it's real to that person. So them just saying it out loud sometimes can be very therapeutic. And that's one thing that I've learned with my anxiety, saying it out loud sometimes. And it ties back into horror as getting that release. Like McCready at the end of the Thing, when the thing growls at him, he goes, "Yeah, F you too," and throws a dynamite. You can't watch that and not smile. It brings a smile to your face, because it's just like, yeah, it's just, and I think horror movies do that.
Yeah, the stigma is actually something I did want to bring up, because that is something I had a really hard time talking about my anxiety for a really long time, because I just felt like whenever I would open up to people, they would worry, and I don't want them to worry. I want them to just like, hey, it's fine, whatever, dude.
Oh man, you sound like you're in my head. I was just like, just don't. It's just like my motto could be, just don't worry about me.
Yeah. Like I'm anxious. I'll be fine. Like I'm so happy, right? Like don't worry about me. But I feel like there's this stigma when it comes to mental health, that if you have any problem whatsoever, there's this immediate thought in some people that if someone opens up to you about mental health, that means that they are going to hurt themselves.
Right.
And that was something I like felt a lot growing up, of like, no, that's not it. So I'm just gonna shut up about this, because it doesn't seem like people understand. And once I actually started to talk with people in the horror, like local horror community in the small Swedish town that I'm from. And we did like a horror movie circle. We showed up every week, talked about a specific movie, watched it, had fun, and that was really the first group of people where like they would just say, "Hey, I'm not coming today. I just feel like garbage. Like I'm really anxious." Or, "Hey, it's a lot going on at work right now. I can't make it." And that really helped me to sort of formulate my own thoughts and feelings about my mental health.
Yeah, I mean, when you can kind of get that inspiration from other people, it's really good. So that's why I think it is important for people like us who, have some sort of platform to just kind of show people that we can talk about these types of things. Then hopefully that would encourage other people to do the same thing. And like Uncle Pete's saying, just get it out, just having someone listen to you, just talking about it. Like, it seems like if you're not talking to someone and someone's not understanding what you're feeling or what you're going through, it's just like it's just rolling around in your head with no place to go. Like, you just literally have to release it out of your head. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it is like, hey, if you don't have anyone you feel like you can talk to, therapy is great. It will probably take some work to find like a therapist that matches with you. That was my experience for a very long time. I would just sort of bounce around from different therapists to different therapists till I found someone that I could actually feel like, okay, we could have a really good conversation and like I feel safe.
I find it interesting that a lot of people say the exact same thing, that there's that stigma. Oh, I tried therapy once and it didn't work. You know what? Sometimes the chemistry is off. It took me years to find a therapist that it had good chemistry. Like when I started in the military, it was like once a month, once every 2 months. It wasn't doing me any good. I needed to be more often than that. So it took years to get that right person, whether it's male or female, whatever, whoever you're more comfortable with. And if it's not working out, you need to tell a therapist, hey, I'm just not feeling this. Is there, and I get most, if not all therapists are totally understanding, you know?
Yes.
So yeah, it's, I am a full believer in therapy, whether it's an LMFT or psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever. There is nothing ever to be ashamed of for going through therapy. I'm proud that I went through therapy. I'm a much better person for it. Because like Carlin said, you just got to get it out. Someone just, and sometimes therapy, they just sit there and listen. They don't tell you what to do or what not to do. They just listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all you really need is someone to just listen and not judge.
And for people out there who either don't feel like they want to go to therapy or feel like they can't afford it or it's just not an option for whatever reason, I think it's good if you see someone, whether it's online or in person, who seems like they're having a tough day. They've said something like they're feeling down, they're feeling anxious, depressed, whatever. You just kind of say, hey, no pressure, but if you want to talk about it or if you just want someone to listen, I'm here. I've done that a few times on Twitter. If I just kind of see someone, and it's actually always people I don't know, just kind of randomly will be like, "Hey, having a tough day, really down today, whatever." I'll sometimes just post it, as a reply on their tweet, or sometimes if it's something that seems a bit more sensitive, I'll just send them a personal message and just kind of say, "Hey, I saw this. I know you don't know me, but if you want to talk or, you just need someone to listen, like I'm here," because you don't know what people have access to and what they don't. And I see myself in some of these people who are just saying like having a rough day, could really use some good vibes. So I would kind of hope that if I were to ever throw something out there like that, that people would kind of say, "Hey, do you want to talk or just want me to listen to you?"
Like, I think I didn't click in therapy because I was going to someone's office and sitting down. And then when the pandemic hit, all that stuff started happening online, and suddenly I'm way more comfortable because I am in my own home, talking to someone online, which is something that, I play games, I do this feels
Yeah.
comfortable to me,
Mhm.
right? And so a lot of the time it's about like finding the right therapist, and then also finding a format that works for you, whether you are from, you do it from your home, or it might be a thing like Uncle Pete said, where he was going like once a month, and felt like that wasn't enough. So then you'll have to go more often. And then that brings up this other long conversation that I don't think we can get into today, which about healthcare and cost,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
which, very different over here in Sweden than it is in America. And I
Yeah.
would love to actually hear your experiences about that stuff. But I don't like. I think that will be a really big topic, so I don't think
Yeah.
we can get into that. But
Oh, we can definitely do. I already want to do a part 2 to this, so we can definitely
yeah,
discuss that for part 2.
right. Because there's so much we haven't gotten into, like medication.
Yeah, I can give you my experience of my perception on how the military treats mental health.
Yeah,
I don't want to put a blanket out there, but just my perception as as a leader, as a junior sailor, and all the way in between, how it's perceived. You
Mhm.
know,
yeah, yeah, for sure. And then we can uh talk about, specifically when it comes to horror, like specific movies or whatever that has connected with us. Like there's tons of stuff we could explore here, but I think this might be like a good first episode.
yeah. I was just going to ask one. You said that I was just going to ask one question. Is there a go-to movie for you two guys that is going to put a smile on your face? Like if you're feeling down, not for any specific reason. Like if I put this movie on right now, whether it's just in the background or I'm fully engrossed in, this movie's going to put a smile on my face.
I think for me, Assassination Nation, that film. I know I've talked about it here and there on my channel just because I want more people to watch Assassination Nation. But
Mm.
just every time I'm done with that movie, I just feel like jazzed and energized and just good. Like I'm good to go. I think part of it's just the filmmaking itself. Part of it's
Mm.
the story, and part of it's that it's kind of an energetic film. Yeah. Anyway, so that's my pick, Assassination
Yeah,
Nation.
I think my picks would be like very nostalgia based. Probably would be like anything by Wes Craven, because he was my first like horror love.
Mm.
But also, like the really really fun remakes that came out when I was starting to get into horror. Like House of Wax, or
Mm.
the Black Christmas remake I quite like as well. There's something about those really, gritty slasher remakes that I like. The
Awesome.
Hills Have Eyes is a big one. That's actually a good movie.
Yeah. For me, it's just Return of the Living Dead because it's they're out of the grave and they're ready to party is one of the taglines, and it's a riot of a movie. It's just so much fun, and I've seen it so many times. It's one of those movies where the dialogue, like you can recite along with everybody. And when I do that, it makes me smile. Like, oh, I know what he's going to say next. I know what he's going to say next, and it just makes me enjoy it even more.
Yeah,
Well, also that.
I,
Oh, sorry.
no, I was gonna say Return of the Living Dead is a great one. That made me think of another one for me, which is Night of the Creeps.
Mm.
Oh,
Because that one I've
brilliant!
seen so many times. I love it.
I was just gonna say that Return of the Living Dead, like that film, there's just so much going on, and the fact that pacing is so good. It's just like next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing. It's just like crazy after crazy after crazy after crazy.
Yeah,
So
it's like
yeah,
one of those movies. It's 90 minutes long, but you start it and finish it, you think it was 20 minutes because the
yeah.
pacing is just so good.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't drag at all. Like anytime I'm on a flight, I watch Return of the Living Dead because it makes 90 minutes go by like that.
Yeah, I
Nice.
would it's funny. Like I'm thinking back or I'm thinking on it now, and it's like all these movies that I would consider comfort watches would be like very of their time. Like these 80s movies that are very 80s, or like for me, a lot of like Hammer horror films from like the 50s and 60s of like that gothic,
Yeah.
horror aesthetic.
80s is, well, speaking of the 80s, Carl and I are doing our new series, Horror Movie Superlatives, where we're going through the 80s, and it's tough to choose some of these movies in these categories because there's so much gold that came out between 1980 and 89. There's just pure gold.
Yeah. Yeah, I was watching one of you guys' video, and I'm like, the hell did they not pick this for most amazing? And then there's like 10 other movies that I could have said the same thing about.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's and talking about the community, the feedback that we have only had one video out. 1981 comes out tomorrow, but the feedback on the first one, I was blown away. So many wonderful commented like, "Oh, I love your guys' picks. Oh, I have all these new movies I need to go find because you
Yeah.
guys spoke about them. You glowed about them. Now I need to go find these movies." And that just makes me feel incredible that someone wants to go find a movie out because they saw my excitement for it. So yeah, the community is pretty awesome.
Yeah, Pete, you had one on there that I hadn't seen about like killer crabs or something.
Oh,
Yeah,
Island
I
Claws.
didn't know about that one
Yeah,
either.
yeah. I have
I had
to
no
track that
clue,
one down.
but yeah, you better believe it's on my list now.
And
Yeah.
even Death Ship, people are like, "Oh my god, I've never heard of Death Ship is a wild ride."
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's been on my list. I just got to bump it up now. Just so much to watch.
All right. I think this is a good time to like wrap up.
Sure.
Do we want to like do a whole spiel where we plug all our stuff? So we all have YouTube channels.
Sure.
Yeah, you can subscribe, smash that like button.
Yeah.
You can find me on YouTube. Just it's your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete, and my series is called Nails in a Coffin, where I rate on-screen kills. And the more stupid you get, 1 nail. The more smart the victim is, they get 4 nails.
And I'm Carlin Cook. You can just find me by my name on YouTube. Literally just Carlin Cook because I'm just some guy. Just doing a lot of horror movie reviews. I also review some other stuff from time to time. All horror related, like comics, books, games. That's more rare, but doing a lot of in-depth analysis on horror films. And yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, so I have a podcast called Guest of Horror, which you can find on Spotify and pretty much everywhere where you find your podcasts. I also have a YouTube channel where I upload pretty much whatever I feel like. There's lots of music on there. There's lots of like sort of small like video essay type of stuff about horror. Try to keep it a fair balance of like my music and horror. So yeah. So subscribe to everyone, and yeah, this was a great conversation, and I'm really happy that we did this, and I really do mean this. Like, I'm really happy that I met you guys, and we could talk about some of this stuff
100%.
because
Yeah.
I do want to say, if somebody out there listening right now or watching, if you want someone who just to listen, shoot me a message. If it's just to listen, I'll put myself out there. If you're listening to this and you think you may, understand how we feel, you may empathize, or you may have some questions, please feel free to shoot me a message.
Yeah, never feel bad about feeling.